When my sister-in-law came to live with us, I thought she was a blessing. But months later, I realized she had come to bury more than just my father. She came to bury the truth. I still remember the smell of chamomile tea that morning, faint, calming, and bitter all the same. The house was too quiet. It had been a week since Daddy's funeral, yet his slippers still sat by the door, like he might walk in any second. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table for hours, turning his old brass keychain in my hand. That key used to open the drawer in his desk, the one he always said held his affairs. I wasn't thinking about wills or money that day. I was just missing him. The way he hummed gospel songs while shaving, or how he'd pretend not to hear Mama's nagging when he snuck an extra spoon of sugar into his coffee. Daddy was steady. Fair. Honest. The kind of man who'd split his last piece of bread 3 ways and still find a way to make everyone feel fed. But that morning, when I went to get the mail, I saw her, Ruth, my sister-in-law, standing in the hallway with that same brass key in her hand. Her face froze when she noticed me. For a second, our eyes locked. She smiled too quickly. "Oh, hey, I was just tidying Daddy's room," she said, slipping the key into her pocket. And that was the first time I felt it, that small, sharp twist in my gut. The kind you can't explain, but you know means something's off. Before all this, our home was peaceful, even with sickness looming. Daddy's health had been declining for months, heart issues, mostly, but he never wanted to go to a nursing home. "If I go, I'll go from my own bed," he said. So we made it work. I adjusted my work schedule. My younger brother Malik came by on weekends, and Ruth, Malik's wife, offered to move in to help around the house. At first, I was grateful. Ruth had a gentle voice, the kind that made you believe her intentions were pure. She'd hum while cooking, tidy the living room before anyone asked, even help Daddy bathe when I was too tired to lift him. I remember thinking, maybe I judged her too quickly. Ruth and Malik had married just 3 years earlier, and though she was polite, I always sensed a kind of watchfulness in her, like she was always taking mental notes. She came from a business family, sharp and strategic. Daddy used to say, "That girl's got ambition." Reminds me of myself when I was young. Back then, I took that as a compliment. Now, I'm not so sure. Still, we were a family. We'd sit together on Sunday evenings for dinner, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, collard greens, Daddy's favorite cornbread. He'd sit at the head of the table, looking tired but happy. Ruth would serve him like a daughter, spooning food onto his plate with care. Sometimes, when he reached for her hand to thank her, I'd see something flicker across her face, not tenderness, but calculation. But who was I to question kindness? So when she said, "Let me handle Daddy's mail, you've got enough on your plate," I let her. When she offered to organize his papers, I agreed. And when she started locking the study door, I told myself she was just protecting Daddy's privacy. The weeks before Daddy passed were heavy. I barely slept. I'd sit by his bed at night, holding his hand, listening to his breathing rise and fall like waves on a tired shore. Ruth would bring us tea, whispering softly, "You should rest, Grace. You can't pour from an empty cup." And I believed her. When Daddy passed, it was peaceful. He closed his eyes mid-sentence, as if finishing a thought only heaven could hear. Ruth cried harder than I did that day, full, body-shaking sobs that made everyone look her way. Even Malik had to hold her upright. I tried not to resent her for that. Grief is strange. It shows up differently for everyone. After the funeral, the house felt hollow. I kept myself busy, cleaning, sorting clothes, cooking meals no one ate. Ruth stayed in the guest room longer than expected, saying she wanted to help with the estate. At the time, that sounded thoughtful. Looking back, it sounds like strategy. It started small, with mail that never reached me. I remember asking, "Ruth, did any letters come for me?" She'd smile, "Just bills, I already sorted them," and wave me off. Then, Daddy's lawyer called, asking if I'd received the documents he sent over. Documents? I didn't know what he meant. I told him no, I hadn't received anything. He hesitated before saying, strange. Your sister-in-law signed for them last week. I hung up slowly, that same twist in my gut returning. That evening, I went to Daddy's study. The door was locked. I hadn't seen that brass key since the morning of the funeral. I knocked softly. No answer. When I turned to leave, I noticed light leaking under the door, faint and steady. I waited. 15 minutes later, Ruth came out, startled. She was holding a folder, pressing it to her chest like a shield. Oh. Grace, you scared me, she said, laughing nervously. What are you doing in there? I asked. Just sorting Daddy's old insurance papers. It's such a mess in there. Her tone was casual, but her eyes told another story. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that look, the way she'd clutched that folder. I wanted to ask Malik, but he'd been distant lately, always tired, always distracted. I told myself not to stir trouble so soon after Daddy's passing. But then, 2 weeks later, the lawyer called again. His tone was different this time, cautious, professional. Grace, he said, I just wanted to confirm, you did receive the revised will, correct? My heart skipped. Revised will? What are you talking about? There was silence. Then he cleared his throat. The will your father signed 6 months ago, the one leaving the estate primarily to Ruth and Malik. She told me you'd already been informed. I felt the room tilt. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I whispered, no, that can't be right. Daddy wouldn't do that. He sighed. Grace, I understand this is upsetting. But the document was legitimate. It was notarized and witnessed. I assumed you knew. My throat tightened. Can you send me a copy? He hesitated. I can't release another copy without the executor's consent. And as per the revised will, that would be Ruth. The line went silent after that. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, listening to the tick of the kitchen clock. Every sound felt louder, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboards, the echo of my own disbelief. Daddy had always said, everything I have, I built for my children. But now, it seemed, his own children had been written out, and replaced by someone who'd barely known him for 5 years. And the person who made it happen was living under my roof. I didn't tell anyone what the lawyer said that night. Not Malik. Not my younger sister, Denise. Not even my aunt, who called every evening just to ask if I'd eaten. Instead, I sat in Daddy's old recliner, the one with the worn armrest and the faint smell of aftershave, and stared into the dark. Every memory that used to comfort me now felt like a riddle. Every kind word from Ruth felt rehearsed. Every moment she'd helped now looked like something else entirely, preparation. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I waited until Ruth left for the grocery store. Then I went to the study. The door was still locked. I found a thin screwdriver in Daddy's toolbox and jimmied the handle, my hands trembling the whole time. When the lock finally gave, the smell of paper and dust hit me like a memory. His desk sat by the window, sunlight pooling across the oak surface. Everything looked neat. Too neat. Daddy's drawer, the one he kept locked, was open. Empty. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the bottom panels of the bookshelf was slightly misaligned. I knelt down, ran my fingers along the edge, and felt the faint outline of a compartment door. When I pressed gently, it clicked open. Inside was a small metal tin. Inside the tin, Daddy's original will. My breath caught. The paper was yellowed but intact. His handwriting, the same careful cursive he used on my birthday cards, scrolled across the first line. To my children, Grace, Malik, and Denise, I leave this home and its contents, to be shared equally. I pressed a hand to my chest. Tears came hot and fast. I could almost hear his voice saying it, slow and steady, like he always did when making sure I understood. But beneath the will was something else, a single envelope with Ruth's name on it. I opened it. Inside was a note in Daddy's handwriting. It said, Ruth, thank you for your kindness during my illness. Please ensure these papers remain private until I am gone. H. Private until I am gone. My hands shook as I read those words again and again. He'd trusted her, not to change his will, but to protect it. And she'd done the opposite. When Ruth came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the tin in front of me. She froze when she saw it. Her smile faltered. Where did you get that? In the study, I said quietly. Behind the bookshelf. Daddy's original will. She didn't speak at first. Just blinked, once, twice, then forced a calm laugh. Oh, Grace, that must be something old. Your father updated his wishes months ago. He wanted Malik to handle the estate, and I helped him with that. I looked at her, steady. And you were the one holding the key. The one sorting his papers. The one who told the lawyer I already knew. Her voice sharpened. I was helping. Your father trusted me because you were too emotional to handle things. That cut deep, deeper than she knew. I felt my throat tighten, but I held her gaze. You mean too emotional to realize you were cutting us out? She slammed her hand on the table. You don't understand how much work I did for this family. I cooked for him, cleaned for him, held his hand when you were too busy crying. You think that didn't matter? I took a slow breath. It mattered. But it doesn't give you the right to rewrite his life. There was silence, thick, heavy, vibrating with anger and guilt. Then she said softly, almost pleading. He wanted me to have something too, Grace. He said I was like a daughter. Then why hide it? I asked. If it was honest, why hide the real will? Her eyes glistened. For a second, I almost saw remorse. Then she looked away. You wouldn't understand. That night, Malik came home to find us in the middle of it, the tin, the letter, the truth. I expected him to take my side. But when Ruth turned to him, crying, trembling, whispering, I only did what your father wanted, he looked at me with confusion. Grace, he said carefully, maybe we should talk to the lawyer first. Maybe Dad did change his mind. You know how private he was. I felt something break then, not anger, just a hollow kind of disbelief. My own brother, I said quietly, you think I'd lie about Daddy's words? He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. I don't know what to believe right now. Ruth leaned into his shoulder, sobbing. I didn't mean to cause trouble. And I realized then, she didn't need to fight. She'd already won. She had Malik wrapped tight in her web of half-truths and tears. So I said nothing. I just stood, walked to Daddy's study, and locked the door behind me. I needed a plan. For 3 days, I barely spoke. I called out of work, stayed in my room, and went through every box, every drawer, every paper in that house. Daddy had kept meticulous records, tax returns, letters, even old checkbooks. And among them, I found something that made my heart jolt, a notarized receipt from a local attorney, dated 2 months before the so-called revised will. The description read, final version, client's signature and witnesses. That was Daddy's real final will. The one I'd found in the tin. Ruth's revision had been forged. The next morning, I drove to the attorney's office, not Daddy's old lawyer, but the notary listed on the receipt. A woman named Mrs. Benton, soft-spoken and in her 70s. She looked at the document, then at me. Oh yes, she said, nodding. I remember Mr. Harris. Lovely man. Very insistent on doing things properly. He came with his daughter, I believe? I frowned. Daughter? She nodded. Yes, the young woman with the scarf. She signed as a witness. Said she was his daughter-in-law. My heart sank. Ruth. I showed her the will from the tin. Is this the one you notarized? She looked closely, adjusted her glasses, and nodded. That's it. Same handwriting, same signature. So this is the valid one? She gave me a firm look. Without a doubt. I thanked her, my hands trembling as I folded the paper back into its envelope. When I drove home that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: power. Quiet, careful power. I walked through the door and found Ruth and Malik in the living room. She was laughing softly, some movie playing in the background. When they saw me, the laughter died. I set the envelope on the coffee table. You both need to see this, I said. The truth, in writing, notarized, and witnessed. Ruth's face went pale. Malik picked up the envelope, scanned the papers, then looked up at her slowly. Ruth, what is this? She stammered. It's old, Malik. Your father changed it. I told you. But he cut her off, his voice rising. You signed this as a witness. You told me he changed it. You lied. And that was the first time I saw Ruth's mask truly crack. When the truth came out, the air in the house shifted. Ruth didn't speak much after that day, and Malik avoided eye contact with both of us. He couldn't deny the paper in his hands, Daddy's real will, his signature, notarized, and witnessed. I felt vindicated, yes, but it wasn't satisfaction that warmed me. It was relief, heavy, bitter relief, knowing Daddy's wishes would finally be honored. The next morning, I called the lawyer who had handled Daddy's estate. I explained what I had found. He listened quietly, making notes. Then he said, Grace, legally, this is clear. The forged document is void. You and your siblings inherit as your father intended. Ruth has no legal standing to contest it. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. So what happens now? I asked. Now, he said, you distribute the estate according to the original will. And if Ruth resists, you have full grounds to take action, though I suspect she'll back down once confronted with the notarized documents. That afternoon, I invited Malik into the study. I laid the papers on the desk, both wills side by side. The difference was clear. Malik, I said softly, this is Daddy's final decision. Not mine, not anyone else's. He wanted us to share this home, the memories, the inheritance. Not Ruth alone. He sat quietly for a moment, looking down at the papers. Then he met my eyes. I didn't know. I trusted her. I should have listened to you. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You weren't the only one misled. She was clever. But we can fix this, together. When we called Ruth into the study, she looked like a ghost of the woman she had been. She had no words. No excuse. Her eyes darted from Malik to me to the papers on the desk, then finally to the floor. I spoke slowly, carefully, with every ounce of composure I could muster. This is Daddy's final will, Ruth. The one you tried to hide. You forged a document, misled Malik, and tried to take what wasn't yours. The law is clear. You have no claim here. Her voice trembled. I didn't mean to. I thought. You thought? I repeated softly. You thought you could play God in Daddy's house? You thought you could rewrite his life without anyone noticing? She flinched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Her guilt spoke louder than words. Malik stood up. Ruth. I trusted you. I loved you. But this is not just about the money. It's about betrayal. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know how else to. I shook my head. You need to leave. Not because I want revenge. But because this is the only way to let everyone heal. Daddy's home, his life, his memories. They belong to us now. She didn't argue. Not really. She left the next day, moving back to her parents' home, her suitcase silent on the porch like an unspoken apology. Word got out quickly. The neighbors, the community, even extended family were stunned. Some had suspected Ruth's ambition, some couldn't believe she would go so far. But when the notarized documents were presented, no one could argue. Daddy's will was honored, and his true wishes finally recognized. Even Malik, who had defended her without realizing it, had to face the truth. He came to me one evening, hands trembling as he poured tea, and said, "Grace, I see now. I let her cloud my judgment. I should have trusted you, should have trusted Dad." I nodded. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we correct them before it's too late. It wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. It was about family, about honesty, about protecting Daddy's memory. I held a small family meeting in the living room a week later. Denise, Malik, and I went through every detail, the home, the papers, even Daddy's old photographs. We laughed a little, cried a little, and shared stories about him, letting his presence fill the house once more. It was the first time in months I felt real peace. Even neighbors noticed the change. Mrs. Callahan from down the street said, "Grace, the house feels like it did when your father was here, warm, steady. You've done him proud." I smiled, but inside, I knew the peace wasn't just for the house. It was for me, for all of us. For Daddy. But Ruth's betrayal left a lesson too, a reminder that kindness and trust, while precious, must be balanced with vigilance. I began documenting everything from that day forward. Copies of letters, receipts, and even small reminders of Daddy's wishes went into a safe place. Not because I expected betrayal again, but because knowledge, once gained, becomes its own shield. And in that quiet, I found clarity. We had survived deceit, manipulation, and broken trust. And though it left scars, it also brought us closer. Malik, who had been blind to Ruth's ambitions, now saw the depth of honesty in family. Denise, who had stayed on the sidelines, became more involved, more protective. And I learned the strength that comes not from confrontation alone, but from patience, observation, and courage. After Ruth left, the house felt lighter, almost as if Daddy's spirit had been waiting for the truth to emerge before it could settle fully. The air smelled faintly of his aftershave and old books, a comforting blend I hadn't realized I'd missed. The quiet was no longer heavy. It was gentle, a pause that allowed the heart to catch up with itself. Malik apologized often over the next few days. Not just for trusting Ruth blindly, but for doubting me, for letting the shadows of deceit grow between us. "I can't believe I let her manipulate me," he said one evening, voice low, eyes cast down. "I should have seen it sooner." I took his hand, squeezed it. "You did what anyone would have done. She was good at what she did. But now we know the truth. That's what matters." And it did. The truth was like sunlight through dusty windows, it cleared everything, even if the dust had settled in unexpected corners. We began the process of restoring the house to what Daddy had envisioned. I organized the study, placing his letters and old photographs in neat stacks. I arranged the living room to match how he liked it, the recliner by the window, the worn coffee table, the family portraits on the wall. Each item felt sacred, a tangible piece of his presence. Denise helped with the kitchen, cooking meals just like Daddy would have wanted. She made cornbread and fried chicken, and we laughed when we remembered how Daddy used to sneak sugar into his coffee while pretending not to. The house felt alive again, filled with stories and memories instead of tension and secrets. Malik and I also worked on rebuilding trust. It wasn't just about the estate anymore, it was about family. We spent evenings talking, sharing memories, and acknowledging the ways we had hurt each other, intentionally or not. Each conversation felt like a small stitch, mending old wounds and strengthening the bond Daddy had always wanted us to preserve. I realized that forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal. It doesn't excuse it. But it gives you the space to heal. And healing, I found, is a lot like tending a garden, patient, careful, and deliberate. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the porch, looking at the garden Daddy had planted years ago. The scent of jasmine drifted on the breeze. Sunlight filtered through the old oak tree, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. I thought about Ruth, about the choices she made, and I felt no anger. Only understanding. Not sympathy. I had no sympathy for betrayal, but understanding that people act out of fear, ambition, or desire, and sometimes it hurts those who love them most. I whispered a small prayer, asking for continued guidance, for strength to protect what Daddy built, and for wisdom to move forward without bitterness. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to a rhythm. I returned to work, but now with a lighter heart. I hosted family dinners again, this time with a new sense of intention. Every plate, every story, every shared laugh became a small tribute to Daddy's memory and the truth he wanted preserved. Neighbors noticed the change too. Mrs. Callahan smiled more warmly when she passed by, saying, "The house feels whole again, Grace. Your father would be proud of how you've held it together." I would nod, but inside, I knew the pride belonged to all of us, Malik, Denise, and me. We had faced deception, confronted it, and emerged stronger. One evening, Malik came to me, a small smile on his face. "You know," he said, "I never realized how much I needed your guidance. You saw through her plan when I couldn't. I don't think I'll ever forget that." I smiled back, squeezing his hand. We all have blind spots. The important part is seeing them and correcting course. That's what family is for. As for Ruth, I didn't seek revenge. I didn't call her out publicly, post her lies for the community to judge, or even harbor resentment beyond the first week. Justice, I learned, is sometimes quiet. It's not always about punishment, sometimes it's about truth coming to light and letting consequences follow naturally. She lost the claim, the opportunity, and the trust. That was enough. The house, once tense with suspicion and betrayal, became warm again. Daddy's photographs hung on the walls, the kitchen smelled of baked cornbread, and the living room echoed with laughter once more. I would sit in my chair by the window, listening to the birds outside, and remember him, not in grief, but in gratitude. I realized that healing isn't instantaneous. It comes in small moments, a smile, a shared meal, a memory revisited, a trust rebuilt. And sometimes, it comes with hard lessons about people we love, that even those closest to us may falter, but we can still choose integrity, honesty, and love as our path forward. Malik, Denise, and I often talk about Daddy now. We remember the little things, his laugh, the way he ruffled our hair, the sound of his voice singing hymns on quiet mornings. These memories anchor us, reminding us of what truly matters. I also keep the tin with Daddy's will tucked safely in the study, a symbol of vigilance and respect. Not because I expect betrayal again, but because it reminds me that truth matters. That careful observation, patience, and courage can preserve the things we hold dear. Now, when I sit on that porch and watch the sun dip behind the old oak tree, I feel a quiet kind of gratitude. The house feels like it did when Daddy was alive, steady, safe, filled with warmth and love. But it's more than that. It's a reminder that family isn't just blood or proximity, it's honesty, respect, and the courage to stand for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. I've thought a lot about Ruth, about the choices she made, and I don't hate her. I mourned the betrayal, yes, but I also understand that some people are guided more by ambition than by conscience. I cannot change her path, and I do not wish to. My responsibility was to my father's legacy, to my siblings, and to myself. Healing, I've learned, comes in layers. The first layer is truth. The second layer is justice. And the final layer, the most important, is letting go. Letting go of bitterness, of fear, of the small, gnawing anxieties that grow when we allow betrayal to linger in our hearts. Malik and Denise and I are closer now. We talk more openly, laugh more freely, and protect each other more fiercely. We celebrate Daddy's life in every meal, every story, every memory shared in this home. And I've learned to trust again, carefully, yes, but genuinely. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't found the original will. If I had trusted Ruth completely. If I had let her deception go unnoticed. I shudder at the thought. But I also know that life has a way of revealing the truth, if only we are patient enough to see it. And patience, that's something Daddy taught me, even in his quietest moments. Waiting, observing, protecting what matters most without letting anger or fear dictate your actions. That lesson has become my anchor. I share this story not because I want sympathy, or to point fingers, or to celebrate the downfall of someone else. I share it because betrayal is something many of us face, and it's often silent at first. It creeps in through small acts, a lie, a hidden deed, a moment of misplaced trust. And when it is revealed, it shakes the foundation of everything we believe to be true. But there is hope. There is clarity. There is healing. If you are watching this, and you've faced betrayal, by a family member, a friend, a loved one, know this: truth has a way of surfacing. Courage, patience, and careful observation will guide you. And once the truth is revealed, choose your response wisely. You may not control what others do, but you can control how you protect yourself, your family, and your peace. So, I rebuilt. I honored Daddy's legacy. I forgave, not to excuse the betrayal, but to free myself from its weight. And I continue to live, mindful of the lessons learned, embracing the love and integrity that truly define a family. Would you have found the courage to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting someone you thought you could trust? Tell me in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of a time you had to stand up for what was right, please subscribe for more stories like this, stories of family, love, and the quiet strength that carries us through life's hardest moments. Remember, truth matters. Love matters. And healing is always possible, even after betrayal.